So as I previously mentioned, glaciers create certain erosional and depositional features. All right, so very quickly, we have two type of glaciers. One, alpine glaciers, glaciers that occupy mountain valleys, and the second type is what we call continental glaciers. These are glaciers that occupy land masses. For example, a continental glacier would be Greenland, the Greenland glacial ice sheet. Now, like running water, glaciers can erode landscapes and create landscapes, right? And they leave characteristic physical clues of their presence in a geographical area. Now, depending on the type of glacier, they leave behind characteristic characteristic erosional features. As I previously mentioned, one of the things that they leave behind are either glacial or U-shaped valleys. Right, so glaciers carve out existing valleys and leave behind U-shaped valleys. All right, so if when you see in this illustration, this valley is U-shaped. Okay, and as we mentioned before, in terms of the mountains or the alpine glaciers, they leave it behind erosional features like as cirques. So that's half bold, hollow, that is located high or at the head of a glacier. So think about again a scoop of ice cream. You have a scoop of ice cream and you're scooping it out, and it leaves this bowl of depression. And a ret, a knife edge ridge that formed between two cirques. Right? You can also compare it to a mountain that has a spine. Okay? And lastly, a horn occurs when there are several cirques on three or four sides of a mountain. What you have left is a relatively sharp peak. Okay, so these are some of the erosional features that you get from alpine glaciers. Now, typically in certain areas, and especially in areas of New York City or when you are in Central Park or parks in the Bronx, it leaves other erosional features. For example, glacial polish. So the glaciers acts as if it's polished. It's polishing the rock. So it's as if you're you're sand you're sanding you're sanding down or acts as sandpaper. So the silt and clay trapped in glacial ice acts like sandpaper and smooth out the bedrock below it. So here we can see this in this image from Crotona Park in the Bronx. Right, you can see the outcrop has been polished. It also leaves behind glacial striation, which are small scratches in the surface or on the surface of the bedrock. So again, you have rocks from within the glacier that drags on the bedrock and leaves scratches behind. Again, this is what we call glacial striations or grooves. Okay, striations or grooves. Now, when they deposit their sediments, okay, as I mentioned before, it's unsorted or mixed. Right? So they can carry a tremendous amount of sediment, but when they melt or when they retreat, they just dump it all, right? And as a result, you have mixed size or unsorted sediments. And you have different types of names to describe the sediments. One is called glacial till. So glacial till is unsorted sediments deposited from ice. And again, you can see from this illustration here. Now, one fact that we should know, much of the five boroughs and Long Island, and that's the five boroughs of New York City, is composed of weakly consolidated to unconsolidated gravel, sands, and clays, right? And much of it is due in part to the deposition of glacial sediment. And you should see this. You get this little description on page 3 of your reference table, the geologic bedrock page of the reference table. That's page 3. Now, you have different types of till, all right? And moraines are deposits of till, right? So lateral moraine, there's piles of till deposited around the side of a glacier. The terminal moraine, these are deposits of till at the front of the glacier. a medial moraine deposits the till in the middle of the glacier, right? And we can see this in the illustration here. Here's your medial moraine, okay, right in the middle. Then you have on the side here, you have your lateral moraine, okay? Now, the terminal moraine is the furthest extent of the glacier's advance. And what it does, it pretty much bulldozers the land or the sediment in front of it. And what you get is essentially is a hill. Okay, you have this hill structure. So it marks the terminal moraine, it marks the most southernmost advance of a glacier. Okay, now in terms of the large rocks that you may see, depending on where you are within the Northeast region or New York State, or within the five boroughs of Long Island, you see these large rocks. These are called erratics. These are large isolated boulders deposited by glaciers, right? And you see a lot of this. You tend to see this in areas, say, for example, in Central Park. Okay, you have these large boulders that's just been deposited by glaciers, right? So again, these are called glacial erratics or erratics. Okay, another uh, feature created by glaciers, what they call drumlins. So drumlins are long, low mounds of till that have a rounded teardrop shape, right? So the slope side shows you the direction of flow. Okay, the slope side shows you direction of flow, right? So these are drumlins, right? Then you have the outwash plains. That's the plain of glacial sediment carried away by glacial melt. This is the one case where the outwash plain is sorted sediments. All right, so this area tends to be very flat, and the particles and sediments tend to be very fine. And lastly, you have what we call kettle lakes. So that's buried glacial ice that forms a pit, right? And glacial lakes formed by the gouging out of the Earth's surface by glaciers, right? So glacial lakes, for example, the Finger Lakes of upstate New York, right? You can again find that in page 3 of the reference table, or the Great Lakes, Lake Erie, Lake Huron, Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, right? These lakes were formed by the gouging out and the melting of the glaciers. So these are typically, again, uh, these are topics or concepts that's typically asked on the regions, especially in terms of glaciers.